Hello everyone and welcome to episode 66 of the PE Geek Podcast, and as always it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Now I'm joined by none other than Pat Coleman coming from Tasmania. How are you, Pat?
Yeah, really well, Jarrod. Great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So set the scene for us. What's the day like there right now?
It's winter here at the moment. It's blowing an absolute gale. All the sports grounds are closed. So yeah, not particularly pleasant Tasmania weather at the moment.
It's now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Tasmania is that island right off the bottom of Australia. And you guys refer to Australia as the mainland. And as I understand it, you spent a little bit of time there doing your training?
Yeah, I spent 8 years on the mainland after school. So grew up in Tassie, did all my schooling down here, and moved to Brisbane to do my teacher training at QUT. Mm-hmm. And then from there managed to pick up a job in the nation capital, Canberra, and spent 4 years there before moving back home.
Awesome. And I'm assuming that growing up there was this sort of affinity with sports and you know, physical education maybe played a part in that. And did that lead you down the track of wanting to be in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my parents put me into just about every sport you could imagine. You know, cricket, footy, soccer, athletics, you know, the works.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, you know, myself and my brother were really fortunate in that regard that we did a lot of structured sporting activity, but we were also, you know, when you get home from school and you'd run out into the backyard and be kicking a footy or, you know, playing a game of cricket or whatever. So sport was always a really big part of my life.
Yeah, and it seems to be something that a lot of us do have in common. You know, growing up, it was definitely a passion of mine, and it was, you know, how can I continue this passion somehow and make it part of my career? And that's definitely what led me down this track, and it seems to be similar for many people that I do work with. So, I mean, what do you enjoy about the job these days? Is there something that you find yourself getting a lot of enjoyment from?
I suppose, well, going back to the first part about, you know, the passion that you have for physical activity, you know, for me signing up to do teaching, the thought was, oh yeah, I'll just go and play games all day.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. That's what I really enjoyed. And, you know, once you get into it, you understand that that's not really what it's about. It's about actually the kids playing the games and not you. So, you know, you fall aside pretty quickly, I think, if as a teacher, if you think that you can just run into a classroom and play a game. So I think the thing that excited me to start with as a teacher, and the thing that still does, is actually seeing the students succeed. And whether that be in the PE space or in other areas, you know, that those light bulb moments that kids have where things just start to click, and, you know, that's probably the thing that excites me the most about teaching.
For sure. I mean, and I think the great thing about phys ed is that moment can be quite visible too. You know, we don't always have it as clear in other subject areas because of, you know, it's maybe not quite apparent, but in phys ed it can be the product of something physical, so we can see it quite readily. And I think you're right, those moments have been some of the best, you know, situations where a kid has finally grasped a skill and can execute that skill, and I think that's something that makes our subject quite special. So somewhere along the line you've got an interest in technology and the role that it can play. Do you remember what sort of led you down that path?
Yeah, I think, you know, to start with, there's more the administration side of things, being able to use some of the technology out there that made my life easier outside of the classroom. So, you know, things like being able to flag emails and assign tasks to people, you know, through the Outlook system. That was probably what mainly got my foot in the door with tech, and just how that made life so much easier. So for me, I suppose my initial introduction to technology was really about trying to save time and make things easier outside of the classroom. And I wasn't really using a lot within the classroom setting just to begin with. I just struggled initially to find meaningful learning experiences for the kids. So yeah, for me it was really about saving time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really valuable thing because, I mean, if you survey teachers, they will say that a lot of the stuff that they do outside of their face-to-face stuff really does take up most of their time, and finding ways to leverage tech to support that so you can then spend more time focusing on the thing that we all got started, or the reason why we became teachers, I think is really quite powerful. So I value tech that does that. So what are some of the things that, I know you briefly alluded to Microsoft Outlook and, you know, what are some of the tools that you found that did help you leverage some of your time?
Yeah, I'm a big Microsoft fan. So Outlook, and then the task system they have within Outlook. So for me, starting to run, say, sporting carnivals, is you've got this whole big list of things you need to do. Everything from entering student data for events, bus bookings, actually having the equipment ready on the day. Those are all small things that need to be done, and a lot of the time you don't do them yourself. You work within a team to make sure they're done within a department. Very early on, I started to establish these, to-do lists, and then making them online and actually allocating tasks out to people. And that way, if it's a shared task, I can see when things are getting done, and you can tap people on the shoulder if they're not quite up to date and say, hey, I need those bus bookings done. They should have been done last week. Can you get onto that? So it really allows you to, keep on top of everything and include other people to make sure things get done, rather than just relying on, people actually doing what they say they might do. You can actually really check in and keep a close eye on what's happening.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, regardless of whether you're using a Google-based system or, a Microsoft-based system, a lot of these things are possible across multiple platforms now. And, being able to share lists and collaborate is the theme here of why that's been useful for you. And I certainly agree. It also eliminates that paper trail, which at its time can be a little bit of a mess, when you lose things. And so, I mean, I've found that just by being digital with a lot of the stuff that we did that was important, we've seen a big progress in our direction. We're a Google school, and that's how we tackle it. But there's the cross possibilities are there in both platforms. So, beyond the administrative stuff, what sort of then led you into then trying to use it in your classroom practice?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of years ago, I had to teach a maths class, and I'd done maths at university, but never actually had the chance to teach it. So I was a little bit apprehensive in terms of teaching and knowing whether my students are actually learning in the class setting. So we use Jacaranda, and one of the add-ons they've got within their software package is something called Jack Plus, and essentially all it is a series of multiple choice questions that you can ask the kids, and then from that you get the data back. So for me, what I do, teach a lesson, set 5 questions for homework that the kids would log on and do, and then I'd get the data straight away back to say that, little Johnny only got 2 out of 5. So that would, straight away for me, next lesson, catch up with Johnny and say, hey, you only got 2 out of 5, what's going on? You not understand this. Or the other thing I actually found really valuable was the fact that you'd sometimes set 5 questions for homework, and the whole class would do really poorly. So rather than that being a reflection on the students' understanding, that's probably more a reflection on me and how I taught that lesson. So really created that solid data and evidence for feedback in terms of how my lessons went. So that was probably my first real introduction to using tech and utilising it effectively.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something that a lot of teachers can get value from. And I like how you've managed to flip what that data means to be a reflection on your own teaching. And I've been in that situation before where I've collected data and it's pretty clear that it must have been what I'd set up as a learning experience that led them down that path. And I think we need to be open to this because, we need to be open to learning and experiencing, new things, and that data can be quite powerful. So what tool you said you were using for that? That was Jacaranda, like inbuilt into their program?
Yep. So that's obviously not feasible for everyone, whether depending what system you're up to, but there's so many other things out there that you can do it with. I know Google now have their own quizzes built within their sheets, but I've been a big fan of Flubaroo in the past, and use that in other subject areas where the Jack Plus hasn't supported particular subjects such as health. So there's plenty of options out there.
Things like Socrative and Kahoot, etc.
Absolutely.
They make it possible for you to create these quizzes and then get data on the back end. But I love the idea of how you use that to then front load the next class, because you sort of already got that idea of where kids were at and you could continue it beyond there. It's really quite powerful. How have the kids responded to these sort of things?
I think the kids really enjoyed it because for them it was almost less homework time. I think a lot of maths teachers fall into the mentality of, just do 30 questions or, do 30 minutes of homework. Whereas, that's often, I don't think, not that meaningful. So for the kids, it kind of, they could see it's directly relating to the outcomes of the next lesson in the fact that, if they get everything right, well, we can move on. We don't need to spend any more time of that. Or if they found it particularly challenging, we can spend the time there. So I suppose there's always those tech issues you have of, kids, my Wi-Fi was out or the NBN was getting connected and whatever, and, you just deal with those as you can. But, the kids seem to respond really well to it. I mean, their textbooks online, kids now are just so used to everything being accessible through tech that it's just becoming the norm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we take it for granted in many places, the availability of these digital tools, and, it just got reinforced to me recently when I was in Africa, just how powerful they are. And, my tour guide in Kenya, he was talking to me about things like what you've just mentioned, just the availability of some of the digital resources, and they were the first ever tools that his kids ever saw. They never had a textbook, ever. They never had access to the traditional resources that we sort of grew up and have become accustomed to. So they represent a big shift in what makes, this third world, up to date with some of the teaching that we have available. So I think it's quite, quite awesome. You briefly alluded there to some of the issues that have happened across the way with kids. What are some of the hurdles that you faced with using tech in the program? You mentioned Wi-Fi. Has there been anything else?
Probably the biggest challenge is actually just not relying on it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the tech's just a tool that we use, and the 5 questions you set for homework, if kids are having trouble with that, well, you just print them and they get them done in another way, or you can hold them back in class time and get them to do those 5 questions there if it becomes a continual problem. So. Yeah, there's always ways you can overcome those tech issues, and I think a lot of the time the kids know that they're smarter than us with the tech. They use it probably more than any of us do, and it's they'll use it as any excuse to not do things as well. So much so that I know there's now a couple of videos going around with the how you have to when you restart your computer you get the updates, and it seems to take forever. There's a 20-minute video now that our kids are using at school to get out of doing work by saying, oh look, my computer's doing updates, and they just run this video, and then as soon as the teacher walks away they alt tab and they go back to playing another game again. So it's some of those you develop your own little, I suppose, methods for dealing with those things. So for me now, teaching, if I'm in a classroom setting, I actually sit at the back of the classroom. So I'll teach from my device. So I use a scribe and just project that up onto the board. I can see all the kids' computer screens because I'm sitting behind them, and that way, making sure they're actually on task. Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly right. At the end of the day, I mean, people have always found a way to get out of things. Tech is no different, and that's right. Good teaching is what makes these things work, and an example of that is sitting at the back of the room so you can see screens, whereas the people who are just assuming that kids are going to do the right thing will probably sit at the front and then find that that's not the case and then blame the tech. But really it's not about that. It's about changing our the way that we approach it to suit the situation. So I think that's a great way to think about it. Beyond that, I mean, what are you excited about? Is there any sort of tools at the moment that you've looked at and thought, I'd like to maybe use that, but the situation hasn't, came about yet?
Yeah, I suppose the whole virtual reality within education's huge at the moment. But trying to find a meaningful integration to that within the classroom setting, that's probably something I'm struggling with at the moment. I can see where it's going to go, and I mean, it'd be great if you could have kids, say, wearing Google glasses and they go home and, you might be doing volleyball and they see a volleyball come over the net. They only need that couple of metres space to actually operate. So that's really exciting where that's going to be heading. And I suppose I've got some other things, trying to look at implementing around, kids being able to share some of their own learning experiences and their reflections within class as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a program called Sway, which I suppose is a little bit like PowerPoint.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more of a storytelling platform. So working at the moment where kids can, we can have the demonstration of, the success criteria of what a really good skill looks like. The kids can collect some of their own evidence and then reflect on how they're, how they're actually achieving towards that standard and that skill set.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. No, I mean, I saw the work that you were sort of pieced up on the ConnectedPE website about Sway, and there was a new one for me, and it looked quite, it was quite immersive, sort of things that you could build with it.
Yeah, it's got, I mean, the advantage is I can build, say, a template around, how I want it to look, and then the kids can modify that to suit, how they actually want to put their information across. So at the end of the day, it's about them being able to share what they're learning as well. That portfolio style system where, they can share it with their parents and their peers and, grandma and whoever on the other side of the world that they want to. So it's got that flexibility there too.
Yeah, perfect. And I know another thing that you've, recently sort of got a little bit excited about is QR codes, and had produced some really good resources inside of ConnectedPE as well. Do you want to touch on how you got introduced into those and then sort of where that's led?
Yeah, so I am within the ConnectedPE members area. There's a webinar on QR codes and how they can be used and created. So looking at that, and then some of the resources there, particularly Joey Fife, and he developed some skill cards for hockey. So I ended up using similar method to do some badminton ones where there's the QR code, so the kids can essentially pick their own level of skill. So how it practically looks in a classroom setting is there's a skill poster put up on a wall, might be serving, for example. Students walk over to the wall, they select a level, so 1, 2 or 3, scan the code, and then they can go away and work on that particular level. If they find that the level's too easy for them, they just walk up, scan level 2, away they go, or if it's too hard, they can drop back a level. So builds in that automatic differentiation in terms of, kids being able to do meaningful tasks, but also, it doesn't point out the fact that they're not operating at, say, a level that the others in the class might be as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's that QR code skill poster example is so impressive. And, I've had a lot of success using them and seeing the kids operate at the levels that, match with their own thinking about where they're at. And there's a bit of data behind, like research-wise, that kids are actually quite capable of doing that. So I think the QR code skill posters are tremendous. And we'll put a link in the show notes to the posters that we're talking about. We can go and download and check them out. But you also developed some gym equipment QR code posters. You wanted to share about what they were?
Yeah, so that's just coming back to the badminton ones to start with. The big advantage is that it doesn't matter whether I'm there or not. The kids can still have a meaningful lesson. They can still see what the examples are, and so if I'm away, leaving a relief lesson is easy. It's just you could give a teacher a set of cards and away they go. So similar kind of thing with the gym codes. Our weights room now is our gym induction is done online. So students watch some videos, complete some safety questionnaires, etc., to make sure that they can use the room safely. So, we know if we sit there and watch 30 minutes of video about how to use machines, that we're not going to retain that information when we walk into the gym. So to try and combat that...
It's not contextually relevant, is it? Like it's not in the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, whether or not you use a particular machine and all those different things. So we created QR codes that are now just sticky labelled onto each of the machines, goes through the safety considerations that people need to be aware of, and then how to operate that machine, technically sound so that you're getting the best out of your workout.
Yeah, it's a tremendous example of QR codes being used to guide people through equipment, and the opportunities there are vast. I mean, it's not just gym equipment. You could have it tied to anything where there is the need for some sort of instruction related to it, and then therefore people get that autonomy about how to do or how to use it, and that frees up you to then be focusing on something a little bit more valuable, which I don't think is the safety elements of those gym equipment. You'd agree, wouldn't you?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah.
Which I think is quite cool. So opportunities are massive. So I mean, where can people find out more about the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so being a member of ConnectedPE, that's probably the best place to find out some of the stuff I'm looking at. So head along to the members area there. Not a big Twitter user, I'd say, but you can connect with me that way. My handle's @PSL Coleman. But I definitely recommend people getting along into ConnectedPE. For me, that's I find that a little bit more collaborative and a little bit more creative in terms of what we can do. Twitter, from my end, is just a lot of the times more of a distraction than a help.
It can be. I mean, it's just so huge in terms of the sheer volume of activity, and I will find myself going down a path that I hadn't actually intended on doing if I end up on there, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So absolutely recommend getting in touch, following him on Twitter, just connecting and talking, because he is doing some really tremendously powerful things. And if you're inside ConnectedPE, and if you're not, come along, join us, and we can definitely collaborate on some new ideas. And I know that Patrick would definitely be keen to do that. So thanks again for jumping onto the episode, and I look forward to speaking soon.
Thanks, Jarrod. Cheers.
See you, mate.